alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest to the podcast, C.P. Hoff, author of West of Ireland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really glad you asked me.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to meet new folks on the podcast. What's West of Ireland about, I guess, and what sort of stuff do you write in general?
I write humor. And West of Ireland is a book about a family. It takes place just before the First World War. And it's about a family who, when they get married, she thinks she's going to have Catholic family, tons of kids. She promises one to the church. And through circumstance, she loses all her children except for one. And when her sister-in-law, who is a nun, who left the family home when Mrs. O'Brien married Mr. O'Brien, and does not like being a nun, comes to claim that child, it's what the family will do to keep her out of the church.
Ah, okay. So is this historical fiction?
Well, it takes place then, but there's some historical aspects to it, but it's more just family drama, family saga.
Oh, cool. I do enjoy a good family saga. I've not read a whole ton of them. Weirdly, I've not read a whole ton of them in print, or at least not in prose. I mean, I actually paid more attention to some, weirdly, in anime. That's my favorite. Really? My favorite family saga is an anime for some.
Our daughter loves anime. She watches it all the time. She thinks it's amazing.
It's a very interesting medium, especially because it's a lot. It's what happened to comics when they went to Japan for 50 years or 60 years. I guess 70 now, maybe more. She likes
the storyline sometimes better than some of the stuff we have over here.
Yes,
she thinks the characters are stronger.
They have a lot. There's a lot of shows that I can make that argument for. Yeah, and the one I was thinking of was JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is this incredibly weird show, as the title might suggest. But it's also a family. It's also a family saga. It takes place.
I'm going to write that down and tell her about it because I don't know if she watches that one.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's one of the older shows that kind of made it into the American stream. It's like similar in age to something like Dragon Ball, like those old classic ones. But the manga is the original comics. But the show is pretty new. The show is pretty recent. Yeah. Anyway, and it follows generations of this family that are basically like superheroes, and they fight monsters and vampires and stuff. But they, whatever. It starts off in England anyway, in like the 18th.
Oh,
century.
Does it?
In like the 19th century, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds neat.
Yeah. Then it goes. Yeah, anyway, it's a fun show. It's actually quite popular these days. So probably anybody who's heard of it, who watches anime now, most people will have heard of it. It's just funny that I'm going on about it. I'm doing a terrible job explaining this thing that a lot of people love, including me. But yeah, whatever.
Is it a long show? Or does it?
Well, it takes each of the different characters has kind of their own story. So. There's 5 parts out right now, and each one follows a different character, but they're all in the same timeline, and they're all members of basically the same family. So, like the first show, the first part, and the beginning's on Netflix. The first 2 parts are on Netflix, and that's season 1 and 2.
Okay.
Or no, maybe it's even more on Netflix because season 1 is both part 1 and part 2. Because part 1's pretty short; it's like 7 or 8 episodes, and then part 2 is like the rest is like another 20 episodes or something. And
what you get in Netflix in the States isn't the same as what you get in Canada.
That's true.
We don't get as many shows, so we can try to get it there, but I'm not sure.
There's also Hulu generally has really good access, but the one place that you can definitely find it is Crunchyroll, which is an anime-only site, but that's free.
Oh, really?
If you know where to find it, yeah. That's a PSA for people who want to watch more anime, because Crunchyroll has free options where you can just watch with ads, or you can pay premium, and it's got its own streaming service.
Oh.
Yeah, the anime is pretty big. So they have their own streaming services. Anyway. Yeah, but that's enough about that. What I wanted to ask you about Is West of Ireland your first novel, or do you have other novels out there?
No, it's my second one.
Oh, okay.
Do you know Kirkus? The Kirkus
Yeah.
Reviews? Yeah, it was one of the in the top books for Kirkus Reviews 2020.
Wow.
So yeah, so because they take the top 100 of independent publishers, I think, and then at the top 100 of traditional publishers, and I was in the top 100 for independent publishers. And it got a Kirkus star, and it's kind of nice. I guess only 2% of independent publishers get a star, and 10% of traditional publishers can get because of the different quality. Yeah. And they review over 10,000 books a year, so I felt pretty good about that.
That is pretty impressive, I gotta say. Good job. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah, I felt pretty good. And then my first novel was longlisted for the Stephen Leacock Award. It's the Humor Award in Canada. Stephen Leacock was our what's his name? When you want to think of a name, you can't. Mm-hmm. Huckleberry Finn. Tom Sawyer. Mark Twain. Yeah, he was Canada's Mark Twain. So that's our Humor Award. It was longlisted for that award when it came out. I was up against God, why can't I remember names tonight? Shrek. Who did the voice for Shrek?
Mike Myers?
Mike Myers. I was up against him. He was running for the award the same time I was.
Wow. So, I didn't realize he
they
was
get
an
some
author.
pretty big names. He wrote, it was on Canada's birthday, 150th birthday, and so he wrote a book about what it was like to be a Canadian for its 150th birthday. And I don't think that's the only big book he's written, but that was the book he had put in that year. And actually, he wasn't longlisted, so it's kind of neat to say you're in a humor competition and you
trounced him.
Well, I don't think I trounced him, but I edged past him a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose. Maybe. Yeah, you were ahead in the race at any rate.
Yeah.
That's funny. I actually grew up watching movies like Shrek and stuff. That was my generation, I guess. That was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, the first one of those was really funny. The second one was pretty decent too. I actually haven't seen. It's one of those things like I was right on the cusp though, so I stopped watching them like before because they just keep coming out with these movies. This is the weird thing about sequels from movies that are kids movies. Because you keep seeing these, they keep coming out, but the audience changes. That's the weirdest thing about it, honestly, to me. And you think about it, okay, so the people who are watching whatever sequel were not the people who watched the first movie in the theater or whatever. They wouldn't. They're not around for the first movie.
I think Shrek had a lot of adult humor in it too.
That's true.
Necessarily just for children. There's a lot of nods there to the adults in the audience.
Good point. I did find maybe that's one of the reasons I liked it better when I was a kid. I felt like it wasn't talking down to me as much. It was a little more mature.
No, yeah.
Yeah, for a movie about an ogre and a donkey and a princess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you write humor and this family drama thing, this family saga?
Well, they're humor in family saga.
Oh, it's humorous stories. Okay.
Yes, they're humorous stories. Yeah, it doesn't sound humorous because
it sounded kind of dark, actually.
It does, but they do. It does. All my books, the first one's about a girl that. The first book I wrote was about a girl that had to go live with her aunt in Saskatchewan that was crazy. The one I just finished is about a girl that was abandoned at the hospital when she was a baby when she was born. But they are all. It doesn't sound like they'd be humorous, but they do tend to gravitate in that direction.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. There was actually this book that kind of makes me think something similar. It was a kid's book that I read when I was a kid. I do not remember the title, but incidentally it was also a Canadian book, so there's a lot of parallels here. But it was a Canadian author, but it took place on Vancouver Island, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I would know it.
And it was about this kid and his weird family. So it was like very, very much like a juvenile novel. Or I'm not sure. Okay. It was maybe almost a book of short stories. But it was pretty influential on me because it had this story like Maud who shot 80 cougars in it. So there's this weird old lady who was always talking about shooting cougars, but there weren't any cougars. So presumably, but she'd shoot like anything that moved. So it was humorous too, obviously.
Yeah, but I don't know it. I think we probably grew up at different generations.
Oh, we definitely are different generations. Yes, yeah. I'm gathering that.
Yeah.
But I thought, and it wasn't like it was a popular book in my neck of the woods because I live in the United States. I'm from Minnesota, but
Okay.
I don't understand. I wish I'm just trying to remember the title and I just can't. That's why I keep talking about it. But never mind that. I'm getting off on tangents a lot more even than usual tonight. So when you write humor, I guess that is interesting to me because I write mostly fantasy and science fiction, as the regular listeners of this podcast will know. But I do like to have some humor in my fiction, but it's so tough to work that into adventure fiction or epic fiction like I try to write.
Have you ever read the Bartimaeus series?
Oh, I've heard of that. That's the one with what was that? Who was that? Stroud?
Yes, Jonathan Stroud.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's the first book around here somewhere.
Yeah, he's humorous, and he writes fantasy. And I love his books. The way he uses words and his turn of phrase. Oh, and if you listen to them on Audible, I think I've read them and listened to them. The voice of the narrator is phenomenal. It's such a well-read book, and he has such good comedic timing. They're very good books. For humor and fantasy, that's the only one. I don't read a lot of fantasy. I read some, but that's the only one that really comes to mind that's humorous that I know of.
Okay, I wasn't thinking. I can think of like Terry Pratchett and maybe Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
some of the Neil Gaiman books were pretty funny too.
They are,
and they were fantasy.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, but and that's a little different than I was thinking because my stories have very dramatic elements, so I wasn't thinking like Terry Pratchett specifically, more like a Neil Gaiman kind of thing where like there's both a serious side and a funny side, to a lot of the stuff. Whereas Terry Pratchett is more madcap or satirical in my view.
But they've written together, haven't they? They
did. They wrote Good Omens. Yeah, that was their.
Yes.
That was the.
Didn't they do another one together, or is that the only one they did?
I don't know of any other ones. I think that was the one.
Okay.
That was the big one. Yeah. Maybe they did other things together, but that's the one I'm familiar with. But it is funny because actually, and even in like science fiction, and you can find there's some humor in some of these books. Even like the late Ian M. Banks wrote some really good. I mean, it's not most of his books are not that funny. Like they're not funny. They're weird. The culture novels. But there's a humorous thread through some parts of them, and because these are really far future books, and they've got like the drones, the basically robots or artificial intelligences are citizens in this culture that is the main civilization that they follow in this series. It's extremely strange, and just because it's so strange, it can be kind of funny at times. And that's actually the side I'd be more erring on because I find timing is so important to humor. How do you handle that in a book? Because books are kind of at the reader's time,
I know, but I think that's why some humor books strike different people. Some people will read something that you find funny and not find it funny at all. It really depends on your internal the way you see humor, the way you read it, and what the reader adds to it. So it really depends on the reader. And have you ever read something and then had someone read it to you and it's totally different?
Mm-hmm.
The take, because they know how the timing should work and where to pause and where to emphasize, and you think, okay, now I get it. When I read it, fell flat. They read it different. It was a totally different thing.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, my twin brother was a huge fan of Terry Pratchett. And he read me a bunch of Terry Pratchett books. It was funny because he just wanted me to hear them, it was that kind of thing. And that's why I still have this quite an affection for some of these Terry Pratchett books that I only ever basically got the audiobook of, as read by my brother.
Does he write as well?
No, he does. He doesn't write books. No, he writes programs though. He writes code and stuff now.
Okay, is he still a big reader?
Not so much. It's actually neither am I. I don't read nearly as much as I used to either. Once I started writing, I actually read less and less, which is a real problem. I'm trying to pick back up at it,
It can be hard because when you're writing, you don't want to catch somebody else's voice. You don't want to be influenced. I mean, kind of. I always have time to edit though. I can always go back and edit my voice back in. I find that pretty easy actually. The issue I have is that at least I had this when I was a teenager. It's been a while since then, of course. But when I was a teenager, I would always when I would write a book, or when I would read a book, I would be like, okay,
this makes me want to write. So I just put it down and start writing. And I got into a habit of doing that for, 10 years, 15 years. And so now...
Is it always...
Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry. Has it always been science fiction and fantasy that you've been into? Or have you written
no,
other things?
I haven't really written a whole lot of other stuff. I've definitely read I've read fairly widely. But no, I've always written science fiction and fantasy. My first novel was science fiction. Kind of science fantasy, really, because it was about, those Norse myths where the world was a sleeping giant or whatever. Mm-hmm. I took that and applied it to a Star Wars space opera setting. So that each planet that could be inhabited had its own, giant living inside it, basically. It was pretty weird.
Okay, did you ever do anything with that, or you?
No, it was awful. I was 13 when I wrote it. It was a bad book. But I still like the space giants concept, yeah.
For 13, though, how many 13-year-olds would sit down long enough to carry through on something like that? That's pretty impressive to do at 13, to write a book.
Well,
I think.
I mean, I figured I always wanted to be a novelist. How about you? This is kind of an interview. You didn't.
No, I was a terrible student. I had a terrible time in school. I was a reluctant reader. It was a real struggle for me. I liked living in my, my imagination stayed in my head. I really did have a strong imagination, but I was so intimidated by I was a terrible speller. And when you've been ridiculed by teachers about the way you spell and things, it's really a hard thing to step out of that and share with a wider population because you're afraid of being ridiculed and you're afraid of looking stupid. But when I first started writing, not long after I first started writing, I met an editor that just told me, you know what? That's what editors are for, spelling. Don't worry about it. You need good ideas. You need to have your own voice. You need to be able to express yourself in an original way. Spelling is what editors do. And I over the years, I've gotten to be a better speller, but she has been instrumental in building my confidence to be able to share my work.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm glad you found someone who could, to help you out with the parts you weren't good at. I mean, I was always bad at characters. Because I think people. I haven't mentioned this in a while, but I think people are probably sick of hearing it in general. If you listen to every episode of the show, you're gonna be sick of it. But because it's every episode is basically me introducing myself to somebody new. But anyway, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome as a kid, so I'm autistic.
Oh, okay.
I'm on the autism spectrum, and I think that's one of the reasons I've always been kind of slow at getting to know my characters because it takes me a long time to get to know people in real life, and it's this weird thing where now I have to go back and edit the beginning of each book where I'm introducing new characters very heavily because I'm like, okay, I now know who this person is. I need to get back in their head. Because it takes me time to learn to know the characters. And so that's one of the reasons my early books are so bad, because I didn't even know I could do that.
Right, but look what you've conquered. I bet you that has translated into your everyday life of how you relate to people. Getting into people's heads on the page like that would give you a different view on, I'm assuming, on society as a whole.
I think it has, yes. It's one of those things that the hard-won knowledge is sometimes the best knowledge. It's very powerful.
I think so. It's your own. It can sit with you. You've discovered it yourself. It's digging deep inside and discovering parts that you never knew you had.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I don't want to just make this about my twin brother and I, because he was not diagnosed autistic, but I talked to him a lot. He's like my best friend. And it's interesting that it came up like this because today he told me something that I thought was really interesting, and I wanted to share it with the podcast in general, but I think, and this is a pretty good context for it, is he said, you've written because I've written a fair number of books now, right? I wrote my first book at 13, like I said, but he was pointing out how there's these people, these other people, even other podcasters, like Brace Belden is this example of a guy who was about my age. He's about 30. He went off to war in his 20s for no real reason, or at least no reason normal people would see as real, right? He went and he fought in Kurdistan. And he's from America. He went and he fought in Kurdistan alongside the Kurds because he believed in what they were doing.
Yeah.
And now he's a podcaster, but that's beside the point. But he did that. He wanted to be a writer. So what did he do? He went and he did crazy stuff because he was afraid of writing books.
But he had to have he must be an idealist. He must have such passion. Is. And when he gets something in his head, he must be pretty loyal.
It seems that way to me. I don't know him personally. I only have heard his podcasts. I do admire the guy, but he seems like a wild individual to me. But my brother was pointing out, but you did something that even this guy's afraid of doing. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. Writers, you do need a little bit of bravery to publish a book. To write a book, to publish it, any of that
you
stuff.
Do.
To submit if you're going traditional. I mean, that's more than I've got. I don't have the endurance to go traditional publishing. I can't stand that. Yeah.
My first book was traditionally published, but I got the rights back for it.
Oh, yeah.
Publisher is now no longer in existence. It was a very small press, but because it was so small, it's not like it was one of these large presses that was so much harder to get into.
Right.
So I'm not sure the big presses really recognized it the same way. I'm sure they thought it was not much different than self-publishing because it was so tiny.
Yeah, those kind of in-between presses.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
a stepping stone.
Yeah, exactly. How do you like the independent publishing experience? I really enjoy it.
You know what I've got a good guy to design my covers. I love the way he's designed my covers. I've got 2 editors now. I have, when the in Canada when Penguin and Random House merged, half the editors left, and the person that was the head of editing in Penguin Canada left, and now she's my editor. So I've got a really good editor, and I've got 2 really good editors. I've got a good person to make my covers. I feel so lucky. If you don't find a good editor, I think it must be very, very hard. Someone who knows the market and knows how to help you grow as a writer. I find I couldn't do it without an editor. My books would not be near as good. And I'm not saying they're great. I mean, somebody would have to read it. It would have to be somebody else's opinion to judge your work, whether they liked it or not. But my ability, I certainly would not.
You wouldn't have learned as much. You wouldn't have gained the skills.
No. Yeah. No. And I'm not sure how many skills I've gained because sometimes I feel like I get lost in the reads, and she helps kind of, show me where I kind of got lost and where I need to get back on the path. And I'm not sure how well I'd find that path on my own. Do you have an editor, or do you?
Oh no, I work with a proofreader. I did for a while, actually. I don't know. I'm not going to say much about the specific circumstances right now, but it wasn't. It's a fairly unhappy problem that I've run into with my proofreader, and it's actually because I don't know what's going on with him right now, and that's the baseline, because he lives in England, and I don't know what happened. He stopped answering my emails, so I don't know what's going on there.
Is it just during COVID that this happened, or was this?
Yeah, it was like a month ago. I was messaging him back in December or whatever, and he's missed 2 emails, so I'm really worried about the guy. But I don't know what happened. I don't have any other way to contact him but email. So,
do you know anybody else in his life that you could contact?
Nope. I never met him in real life. He's a fan of mine. I mean, he was on my mailing list, and he volunteered to proofread for me, and he was really nice and helpful. Did it for a very reasonable rate. But it was also interesting because I've come up with such an editing system now that toward the end, the last book he edited for me, he's like, I'm not sure if I'm really doing anything now. So I'm not sure if I need the services anymore, but I'm still worried about him, obviously. Even though I didn't know him very well, it would be a damn shame if anything had happened to him. Not least of all because, he's just... It just sucks. I know he was a senior citizen though in England somewhere. So maybe he just, I don't like to think about it,
No.
But but I do my own covers. I did work with an editor actually. I did work with a proper editor at one point, like a full, a book. It was Tim Markwitz, who's also an author, and who's been on this show long ago in the depths of time. I should mention this is episode 199 of the podcast. So next
Oh, you
episode is 200. It's been almost 200 episodes, and I'm still like, all right, I got to do something special for next week. Yikes!
What are you gonna do?
I have no idea.
Mm.
Oh boy.
Have you ever read one of your books on? Like, could you read part of your writing online, or
Oh,
is that
I
not
do
something
that. I do that. Yeah, I've read bits and pieces of other people's work here. I do that. That would be a good idea. Some kind of special occasion thing.
Yeah, you should celebrate with all the how far you've come. I mean, what a
I suppose
milestone.
this is the longest I've done any podcast too. About 4 years now must be. Anyway, a little less actually, because but yeah, I liked, and most of the show is guests, but yeah, I've been trying to do more stuff where and I don't know why. I'm sorry I made this episode too much about me. I swear it doesn't usually happen like this.
Oh no, am I hard to talk to? Is it?
No, you're easy to talk to. That's the problem. I'm just running the mouth. Is what I'm saying.
Oh no, I don't mind. I'm podcasting is talking on a podcast like I'm with you. I think you're the fourth person I've talked to.
Okay.
So I'm new to the game, so I'm not quite sure how to be the best guest.
Oh, you're a fine guest. You're doing fine. I'm having no problem with that. I just don't want to run you over too much. If you.
Oh no, you're not. You're not. I like listening to the things you're having to say.
Okay.
I admire you. I don't know if I could be in a position where I could do everything on my own, like you are. All the editing, all the making the cover. That to me seems. I'd be overwhelmed. I like having my hand held a little bit along the way.
Oh, that makes sense too. But like, I know that's the argument a lot of the traditional authors will say too. Or I'm not saying you are, of course, but a lot of the traditional authors that I know of or have met will say like, there's nothing wrong with indie publishing. I'm just kind of don't want to do it. I'm lazy, or I want. They'll literally say that. I'm not putting words into people's mouth. I think that was Mary Robinette Cowell said literally like, I'd rather have someone else do that stuff so I can just focus on the books.
I've listened to her on Writing Excuses. She's been on there for years.
Yeah. I actually met her at the first Writing Excuses retreat, but I think she forgot about me or I lost all my hair in the interim, because when I saw her again a couple of years ago. She didn't recognize me. It's kind of funny. But I was like 22 at that Writing Excuses retreat. That was so long ago. Anyway.
I'm sure she meets so many people that it's hard to not have them kind of run together sometimes.
That's true, too, yeah. Because they've been doing like these cruises and stuff now. They've basically got their own conventions that they do every year, and I've not been back to any of those. I didn't really enjoy the retreat that much. It was interesting, but it wasn't my cup of tea.
Have you been on a retreat you really love?
Oh, no, I never have, actually. At least not for writing. I basically did a retreat back in college, but that was just that was for one course. It was the beginning of the course was a retreat, which was very interesting. That was the retreat I really enjoyed. But no, I've never really had like a writing retreat. Doesn't make sense to me, because writing for me is a daily activity. Even though I'm a binge writer, like that is to say, I like to get big chunks. I also kind of have to have my head in the book all the time, or I won't get there. So
when you say binge writer, when you binge, how many words is that?
It depends on the medium. Like I was dictating for a while, and then I could do 15,000 words in a day.
Oh my god!
But the best I've ever done typing is like 13,000.
Oh, that's still. I don't even stand in your shadow.
And the 13,000. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. Numbers aren't everything, I don't try, and I'm a slow writer most of the time. Actually, I don't do that many words each day because I don't put that much time in, which is my biggest obstacle right now.
I can't imagine even coming close to 13,000 words a day.
It's not every day. It's not every day. I did that one day, and I took 2 months off. That was back in college, because I was a Saturday that I took off, and I said I'm just going to write today, and I wrote 13,000 words.
Oh, that's amazing!
But now that I write full basically every day, and I don't have another job to work except this podcast, which is hardly a job at this point. It's really just, I just kind of just go when I hammer out as many words as I can get, but usually it's not that many, because I have, and honestly, I don't mean to just hang all my problems out here, but, people like it when I do that, I think, because openness is important, and
right.
you know when a writer is honest when they tell you their problems, honestly. So I really like doing that. But maybe weirdly too much. But the issue I'm having now is I've demystified writing too much in a way. It's just the thing I do, but then I also don't value it as much as I should. Like, I mean, you're helping me a lot. You're just saying like, wow, that's by impressing on me. Like, yeah, it's unusual that I'm able to do these things, you know? Or that I do these things at all, you know?
When I hear people like you talk, I think, my good God, you write faster than you can write a book faster than I can read a book if you're writing 13,000 words a day.
No, I write faster than I can read books too.
Holy cow. I'm a slow little plotter.
Oh, it's okay.
I just kind of plod along and get there. I go nowhere fast.
Well, that's what I've been doing lately, honestly. But enjoyment is the important part. It's the most important part.
It is. It is.
I only wanted to write books originally because I thought, oh, that'd be fun. And then it kind of stopped being fun when I was, again, back in college. And then for a long while afterward, because yeah, I don't know.
Is it starting to be fun again?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and there's parts where it's fun, but I'd always lose track of the fun is the problem. You know, like you were saying, you get lost in the weeds, and that happens to me all the time. Like I get stuck just wandering around in circles. I'm like, where am I going? What is the point of this?
Mm-hmm. That's why I like having an editor. Adrian is so good for helping me keep track of things and pulling me in the direction I should be going, because I do get lost and I meander a little bit too much. And you can't do that. She kind of pulls me out.
I guess we're talking about slightly different things here, because I generally don't get lost in the book so much. And that's the problem. I get lost before I get there. And that's why I'm so slow now. I mean, like I say 13,000 words, but that was a decade ago I did that.
I get having fun, and I get going off on a tangent that really doesn't add to the story. So I will, I'll write whole chapters that I've just enjoyed immensely writing, but they don't pull the story ahead. So I put them aside, and hopefully I can wiggle that in somewhere else in another book somewhere. But I think for the last book I wrote, I think there were at least 2 full chapters that were I was having so much fun that, yeah, we didn't need them. And there was bits and pieces here and there, but 2 chapters in a row could be cut out and you didn't notice. So, and I'm not a long-winded writer. I write very short. Like my longest book is 82,000 words. I don't write long books. I don't write long chapters, but I still can meander a bit too much.
Oh, that's all good. I think it'll get you somewhere nice. I find some of my best stuff I've actually, like you said, I've had to cut some of my best stuff from my books too. You know, I just like the beginning of my book Demon Scroll is completely different than the beginning I originally wrote for it, because I realized, oh wait, this beginning is really slow. It doesn't get you to the main character. The first chapter was not with the main character. And then I chopped up and moved it around a little bit. And so now the book does start with the main character. So it's much better. But, because that book, big fantasy, there's all these points of view and all that. But anyway, yeah. So we are running a bit out of time, though.
Okay, sorry.
Not long. No, it's okay. I just wanted to ask you one more question about what have you been reading lately that you'd recommend to the listeners?
Oh, I really like mystery. So I like reading mystery books. I like Louise Penny. She's a Canadian author that writes she's from Quebec, so it's a lot of French Canadian stuff. And I read, I like Louise Penny, and I read something, I think it's called the Saturday, what is it? It's from England right now. The Saturday Murder Club, I think.
Oh,
and it was really good too. Yeah, I think it just won a lot of awards. It just came out this year, and it was really good. It has a strong female characters in that book that aren't, some really strong, wonderful older women. It's about seniors that decide to solve unsolved cases and the things that they do to, manipulate police officers so they help them solve these cases. But it's very good. Yeah.
So,
I also like.
go on. Sorry. No, you go on.
I also like Jenny Lawson. Have you ever heard her?
No, never heard of her.
Oh, she writes a lot about. She writes nonfiction, but she writes a lot about. She has a depression, and she struggles with a few different things. But it's all humorous. Like it is. I know it sounds, but she talks about with things she's done to her, to self-harm things and different things she's done, but it is done. It's totally off. It's off the rails. It is. She does such I love her. She is so good.
Oh, that's awesome. So, yeah. I want to say though, I've been reading. I started a new book recently that I'm reading. It's actually not a new book. It's a traveling book that I picked up at a convention years ago. So I guess it's been at my home. This is one of the probably the longest it's sat anywhere because it's a pretty battered book. Got the library binding and everything. But it's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I forget the name of the author. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's a fantasy novel. But it's set in a historical England where no magic is done, and it's about like the very beginning of this book really hooked me because there's this. I'm not very far into it honestly, but the very beginning is great because there's this society of magicians in a setting where they're saying like, oh yeah, it'd be ungentlemanly to do magic. We can't do magic. It's like so they don't do any magic. But they are magicians, and it's like, why is no magic done in England? That's the big question the main character, I think, asks right at the beginning. It's a very curious book, written very like Regency kind of era in the setting. It's set in the 1800s, early 19th century, and it takes a lot of it feels a lot like one of those books style wise. It's very interesting.
I might pick that up. That sounds good.
It's also a big book, I should say. It's not for the faint of heart because it's like
that's okay.
600 pages long.
I don't mind big books.
Yeah, you just don't write big books, but you don't mind reading them.
No, I don't.
Excellent.
I don't. I like reading them. I like. Have you ever read Guy Gabriel Kay? He writes fantasy.
Oh yeah, I love Kay. I love Tagana.
Oh, my husband's favorite books.
Tagana's an awesome book. I'm surrounded by Kay books here. Yeah,
we've met him.
Oh yeah. Well, he's Canadian, right?
Yeah, he's Canadian. He lives out east now, but we were born in the same town, like the same city in Saskatchewan. But I've met him a couple times when he comes. There's a writing conference in Calgary that he comes to every once in a while. So I've met him a couple of times. He's very shy, and he's deaf in one ear. So you have to make sure when you speak to him that you look at him or he can't hear you.
Wow. But well, then you'd never be able to hear me even if I met him then, because the autism, I don't look at people in the eye very much. It'd be tricky for me.
He needs to read your lips. So as long as he can see your mouth move, he's good. Okay. But he needs to read your lips a little bit. He needs to watch your mouth move. But he's quiet and soft spoken. I didn't know he was so. I didn't know about his deafness, but that's fascinating. Yeah, because he's such a wordsmith though. He's an amazing writer. Yeah, I know he is amazing. I love his work. But when you meet him, you'll find him just like the guy next door. He's just so quiet and unassuming, and yeah.
Yeah, for somebody who worked, there's some writers who are kind of like the literary rock stars, right? The rock stars of their genre or whatever. And he worked at the Tolkien estate. He's this very storied individual. That's interesting that he's so unassuming. You'd say, yeah.
Yes, yeah, he is because he, just kind of a sweater guy,
Yeah, actually, I think I've seen some of his author photos. That part rings true to me from what I've seen already. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you would like him if he ever comes. Watch for When Words Collide. Sometimes he comes, and I think it must be the cheapest conference around. Calgary's a ways to go, but I think it's. I want to say $45 for 3 days.
That's not bad at all, no.
No, Canadian, so that's almost like Monopoly money, right? So it's $45 for 3 days, and you go to everything. That concludes everything. They even have a place in a restaurant where there's free food for you to snack on during the day.
Okay, that's that deal. Okay.
There's pizza.
If I can get to Calgary at some point, I will definitely do that.
It's always in August, like the second weekend in August. And I know this year they've already called it; they're not going to have it, but they'll have it the year after that. But he's come a few times to Calgary for it. You just have to watch it and see when he comes up in the.
Yeah, if the borders are open, I may have to make it. One of these.
Yeah,
days.
You might like it. It's a really amazing conference. Do you ever read? What's his name? He writes sci-fi. He's the big sci-fi writer in Canada.
I'm trying. Oh, Robert J. Sawyer.
Yeah, he comes every time.
Okay. Now, I've not read a whole lot by him, honestly. I'm so behind on all my reading. Like I told you before, I read stuff as like a teenager, and then and then I was an English major, so I read a bunch of literature, classic literary fiction. But then I've been kind of down on. Honestly, that's what I'm gonna do. As soon as we're done here, I'm gonna read some books. I'm gonna read some fiction.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm gonna read, but it's gonna be something. Because I need to get back on that horse immediately. Yeah.
Oh, the one thing I like about Robert J. Sawyer is that anybody that wants to ask him for a beer, he'll go. He doesn't care. He's friends with everybody. People say, "Can you read my book and give me a blurb?" He'll say, "I'll look." He really does. He really is. He's pretty impressive.
That is impressive for a guy who's as famous as him. I mean, he's famous down here too. Yeah.
Well, he's won all the sci-fi awards. I think there's only 4 or 5 guys in the world that have ever done it. And
the Hugo, the Nebula, and what was the other one?
I don't know.
The World Sci-Fi, I believe. Maybe.
Yeah, he's won all of them, and there's only 4 or 5 guys that have ever done it.
Yeah, the trifecta, right? There's 3 big ones. Yeah. I forget what the third one is. Hugo and the Nebula are the first 2.
But he's so easygoing, and so you would never know when you meet him, if you didn't know him, that he was anything but just the average starting writer, because he doesn't.
That's so sweet. That's such a sweet aspect to a person, that they can be down to earth and have a common touch, even when they're so successful. Yeah, that's awesome.
He definitely does. It makes you really check yourself that you don't get too big for your britches, because he's won the Order of Canada. He's quite a big thing.
Yeah, quite accomplished. That's for sure. Yeah.
He is.
Well. It's been fun. It's been great, and we have gone way over the usual time, but that's awesome. I'm happy. I'm glad you were on the show, CP Hoff. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's been fun. Where can people find your work?
You can find me anywhere. You can find me on Amazon or Kobo.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yep.
And as for this podcast, Apple, don't forget. Yeah, sure. You got books out there wide, all over the internet.
Yeah, they're wide. They're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a website people should go to?
It's just cphoff.com.
Connie
at cphoff.com.
.com. Okay, great.
Yep.
And thanks for listening, everybody. And I'll see you again for episode 200. That'll be either later this week or early next week. I forget, because order is strange these days. But episode 200 is right around the bend, and I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for it, but it's going to be special, just like this episode was. Actually, this is a very special episode so far.
Okay.
So thanks for listening, everybody. You can find more about this podcast at mentalcellularpublications.com, which is due for a renovation, and it's in the process of being renovated. So things might be popping around over there, but you'll find the podcast feed with ease. It's just on the front page, so you go there, you'll find it. And you can find my books on Amazon.com. That includes Demon Scroll, or the Demon Hunter series. There's going to be 3 books out soon. Well Country's available for pre-order, so go check that out. 99 cents until launch day. So check it out now. It goes up to $5 on launch day, because I gotta wet my beak somewhere. And of course, in between those, we got Shadowprints. Anyway, then we got the other pre-order I have up currently is Science of War, which is the second Forces of Empire book. But anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. I can't rattle off the titles of all my books. That would be boring and crazy. I have quite a few books out right now. 10 or so. There are going to be more this year, so keep your eyes open. And of course, you can join my mailing list and all that stuff over at mentalcellularpublications.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon.
That tears it.